people have fears around slowing down and allowing their minds to slow down because, well, what do I do with that? Because
Yeah.
there's a question or a fear around not knowing what to do. And actually, when you don't have the tools or the strategies, sometimes what happens is that then opens up your mind to like, okay, then I really need to go into high gear
Yeah.
because
Yes.
the fact that I'm pausing, this isn't good. This means that I'm not doing enough.
On today's episode of Empowered in Health, I have Karen Conlon here. And Karen and I have connected very quickly through our business mentorship, but have also very, very much so have become kind of fast friends, like really have a lot we relate on, a lot we like to talk about. You know, she's a psychotherapist, coach, and author. She has an incredible heart to serve others. She has her own podcast that she recently just launched called Emotionally Wealthy. And I can't wait to dive in today and hear more of Karen's incredible perspective around how do we really continue to take care of ourselves as women? How do we continue to make sure that we're pouring into our own needs as our life changes, as we navigate whatever it is that's coming across our table in work or in our day-to-day life with as moms, et cetera, or whatever it may be. And so, Karen, thank you so much for your time today, my friend. I'm so excited to chat.
Oh man, I am so glad to be here, Erin. And like you said, the first time that we connected, it was online. And then it just was a beautiful mix of chemistry and alignment and just kind of getting each other very quickly. So I love that for us. And I love that we are here now being able to share our messages and our experiences with other people, you know, in support of helping other people make whatever changes they want or need to make in order to optimize their life and their health and their overall well-being, you know, because that's something that I think just spills over into family and parenting and all the other roles that we play. So thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Oh my gosh, of course. And you know, you hit the nail on the head with this idea of like, how do we really empower others, right? How do we encourage others in their season? And, you know, I know one of the things that we've kind of chatted about offline, which we'll chat about today, is this concept of individually empowering people to step into who they are and what they love and giving themselves permission to really step into that fully. And so one of the things I'd love to start with, Karen, is just hearing a little bit more about kind of how you landed where you are now. You know, I know you have a profound story of starting more in sales and you kind of pivoted through a lot of different seasons, becoming a mother and kind of landing where you are now. Talk to us a little bit about kind of what that journey was and how you essentially got to this place of nurturing your own well-being, but also finding your voice and fully stepping into that.
Thank you for asking that question. It's thoughtful. And it's one that I've thought about so many times because I've gone through a lot of iterations of myself before coming here. I just want to first say that nothing's been linear. I've experienced a lot of self-doubt and a lot of confusion about, well, why am I doing this? Or why can't I just stay in this role? I've experienced a lot of course, imposter syndrome, and then I've also, though, on the other hand, experienced a lot of victories and being able to say, oh, well, in spite of or despite of, I am really able to do well. It's interesting because neither one of those have been by themselves, and what I mean by that is that, you know, I've experienced victories. And, you know, a lot of times always though, followed by the thought of like, oh, but, you know, why can't it be better? Or why couldn't I have done that better?
Right.
And so I am a first generation kid / adult now.
Yeah.
And being the child of an immigrant comes with what I refer to the immigrant kids ROI, like the return on investment.
Yeah.
Which the way that I define that is you know, you're not very shielded at all from your parents' struggles and what they're doing on the day to day, because you oftentimes you know, become a parentified kid yourself. And for those of you who haven't heard what that term is or what it means, it's just what it sounds like. It's you being put into adult roles very young, and before you're actually ready to take on those roles,
Right.
emotionally or psychologically. But it's survival, right? I mean, there's no time for prepping you. You just kind of are thrown in, and you got to figure it out because you are part of the support system. Like, it's not a supporting you. It's like, no, you have now become a part of this support system.
Right.
And so, that being said, a lot of the things that I did early on, when I think back, even the major that I chose, which was poli sci,
Yeah.
had nothing to do with what I really wanted. I actually hated it, but I thought, okay, well, poli sci, and then I'm going to, become an attorney, and, this is what my life is going to be. But I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I would find myself walking down the hall and looking at the kids in the journalism office, like they would write the newsletter for, the school. And I remember really feeling jealous because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do research and I wanted to interview people. I had these dreams of
Yeah.
kind of doing what I'm doing now a little bit, right? In this podcast, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But I really spent the first entirety of my life trying really hard to fulfill my mom's dream of, making a name for myself and making money and all these things that made it worthy for me to be
Yeah.
around. At least that's the way that I saw it.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, there was always this little knock, right? There was always this little sort of nudge about like, well, wait, what about me? What about me? This other side of me, this creative side, the side that really wanted to connect with people.
Right.
And it wasn't until I had my daughter, to be honest with you. I have one daughter, and I had her at 37. And it wasn't until she came about, to be honest with you, that it was, I don't know, it was something about being mama bear or whatever, but
Yeah.
I really leaned into boundaries and saying no to people and saying, no, this is not allowed. Interestingly enough, it wasn't about me or for me still,
Yeah.
but it was the very first tinge of courageousness, I guess,
Yeah.
that I had to speak up. So
Yeah.
it wasn't, of course, until later that I decided, oh, okay, well, because of her, I wanted to change my career and, to work less hours or work different hours.
Yeah.
But that was really, going to motherhood for me was really, really the catalyst
Yeah.
to leaning into, wait a minute, do I have feelings about this? I think I have some feelings about this.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, so that I mean, in very general terms, what were the big factors and the big things that I can pinpoint out without getting into all the nitty gritty?
Yeah.
Those are the big milestones in my life that really led me to where I am today.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things that's sticking out to me the most that I want to make sure we recall and revisit is this concept of like feeling like your worth is attached to what someone else has dreamed up for you or what someone else has told you is quote unquote success.
Yeah.
And I know for me, like I can wholeheartedly relate to that. And I know women can really relate to that kind of narrative that we've adopted in some way or that we've heard in some way. So I'm curious, Karen, in your opinion, when you kind of reflect back on that, but you also think about your own story, do you feel like for most women, it takes like this big life transition or this big kind of event to essentially help women pause and say, you know what? Actually, I have a voice or I have an opinion or I need to step fully into something. Like in your mind, do you feel like that is a necessity to happen or what would you say to that?
I don't think that it's a necessity. However, I do find that because in general, I don't want to speak for everyone, but in general, we are so socialized and conditioned
Yeah.
to rationalize things and justify behaviors and say, well, that's just how they are, or, this is just how things are. And on some level, it leaves us feeling a bit like we don't have that much power to change things. I think that there's this compounding or this like accumulation of things that happen. And then I think the actual manifestation of whoa, that moment that we need to change, I think is really subjective. It's very personal to every person.
Yeah.
I definitely have worked with people, clients who it's been like little steps of noticing,
Yeah.
and then other people, like with myself, it's having these very big life milestones that happen.
Yeah.
I think the biggest difference, though, that I have seen between that person where it happens gradually versus someone like me where it happens with like the one like big thing, is that I find that the people where it happens gradually, for whatever reason, their environment, their job, their family situation, whatever it is, they have the space, or they've allowed themselves the space to take notice,
Yeah.
right? Either there's a person in their lives that allows them that, gives them permission, or they have removed themselves from a situation or a person, right? So I think that that's the biggest difference that I've seen, is that those sets of people that come to it little by little
Yeah.
have somehow afforded themselves or been able to have the space.
Yeah.
Someone like me hasn't had that. Someone like me is just like go, 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 go.
Yep.
And it takes something big to kind of stop you in your tracks.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, it's not, for me, it happens to be having a kid. I was having illness. I was having inflammation. I had all kinds of other things going on, but those things were not enough to stop me in my track. For some people, it is a chronic illness. For
Yeah.
some other people, it's like loss of a job
Yeah.
or something really important. So, yeah, so I don't think there's one big thing, but I do think that everybody has their own really personal journey,
Yeah.
and their environment and the people are surrounded by there's like so many factors that I think contribute to how people get to
Yes.
where they are, to that point of self-awareness.
Yeah. That is so good. Like, I love how you talked about essentially the different tracks.
Yeah.
How some people kind of have this slow uncovering because they have a little bit more margin or space to kind of recognize it along the way.
Yeah.
And others are kind of so buried in the day-to-day, the stress, the exhaustion, the whatever, that it kind of takes this massive event to be a
Yeah.
little bit of a wake up call. I know for me, in different seasons, it was different. I had seasons where it was a massive event, and I've had seasons where it's been kind of a slow uncovering, because I learned along
Yeah.
the way in the past, like, okay, if I function like that and don't give myself enough space to start to recognize some of the hidden things that I'm experiencing, like, I'm going to miss a lot of actually enjoying the life that I'm trying to build, or enjoying the family that we've worked so hard to create, or whatever, fill in the blank, right? And I think, Karen, one of the things you're really speaking to right now for me is this idea of how high achievers really fall into this, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's the slow uncovering or the massive event. And I know with your story, it was more or less kind of a massive event or life situation that really changed up like how you were viewing your time, how you were viewing yourself, how you wanted to spend your hours, etc. And so my next question for you is kind of around this idea of speaking to the high achiever, right? Someone who's listening to this absolutely relates to this idea of, maybe they feel exhausted, maybe they feel overwhelmed, maybe they feel so fatigued that they don't know what to do, like they don't know how to get out of it. And it's essentially this idea of like, how do we help women understand, like, if you're in those seasons and if you're feeling like that and you're high achieving, et cetera, like, how do you start to get out of this idea of feeling like being more and more productive is the only way to be successful or be worthy or whatever, and instead replacing it with, I have to back up here and understand what my individual mental and emotional needs are, right? I have to find a way to slow down so I can get in tune with what it is that fills my cup so I can actually show up for my life. And I think that's a very common thing that women go through. Like, they almost get
Yeah.
so buried, they don't know how to pause.
Yeah.
So for the high achieving woman that's listening to this, that maybe feels that battle, what would you say to her? How would you coach her or help her?
So the first thing that I want to actually say is going back to something you said a minute ago about having moments where you are taking notice, right? Like you said, you had moments of taking notice. I've had those moments too,
Yeah.
but for the person who is like me, you have these moments, and then there's this anxiety around like slowing down or
Yep.
stopping.
Yep.
And so I think that that is one of the things that I think a lot of high achievers experience, is that you do have these moments because your body tells you,
Yep.
or your situation, or maybe you become super irritable, right, with your family or your kids or whatever it is. So there are things that are pointing to the fact that something's not working anymore, or the way that you are functioning is not serving you
Yep.
anymore.
Yep.
And so you have these moments of, I don't know, reflection and just like lucidity to a certain degree. But then the thought of, oh my gosh, but if I slow down, that's really scary.
Yeah.
I personally found it to be a very scary place to be. So I
Yes.
didn't allow myself to be in those spaces for very long, because the other side of that coin is, okay, so what if I stop for a moment? Well, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
Right. So part of it is, I think that people have fears around slowing down and allowing their minds to slow down because, well, what do I do with that? Because
Yeah.
there's a question or a fear around not knowing what to do. And actually, when you don't have the tools or the strategies, sometimes what happens is that that then opens up your mind to like, okay, then I really need to go into high gear.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
the fact that I'm pausing, this isn't good. This means that I'm not doing enough. And so we're telling ourselves these stories about the bad thing about stopping, the bad thing about pausing, and about what this says to us, or what it says about us.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that we need to do is start to build tolerance,
Yeah.
right? When I am working with people, I talk to them about building tolerance around the discomfort.
Yes.
We are so avoidant of discomfort, and discomfort is a signal
Yeah.
that something is changing or that
Yeah.
something needs to change, right? Just like people oftentimes are afraid of becoming angry,
Yeah.
right? Well, anger on some level is a message or a signal that something feels unfair, or something doesn't feel right, or maybe something hurts, right? So these are signals. That's how I refer to emotions. They're signals, but oftentimes we don't allow ourselves, or maybe we weren't allowed the space
Yeah.
in our environment growing up to allow ourselves to feel these things, either because it wasn't tolerated, or because that we were told to do too much, or in this house we only accept happy thoughts,
Yeah. Yep.
right? Whatever it might be.
Yep.
And so we learn that there are things that are not allowed. And so imagine if you are constantly in a space where you're only allowed to come up to here, but past this point, we don't go there. Well, what starts happening? You don't know what's on the other side.
Yep.
There's a fear of the unknown. You, on some level, feel like you can't handle it if you go there. And I think this is what happens subconsciously, that we start feeling like we can't handle it if we allow ourselves to go there. So that's the first thing that I really like to start working with, is meeting people where they're at
Yeah.
and acknowledging that, hey, this has worked for you. This is okay. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing up to now because it has worked for you, right?
Yeah.
So I want to honor that and say,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with you, right?
Right.
Like, this is exactly what you've been doing. It's worked for you.
Yeah.
But tell me now what is starting to feel uncomfortable about it,
Yep.
right? So I want them to tell me. I want them to tell me and fill in the blanks. And then the next step is working around tolerance. And it
Yes.
could be very small steps. I'm just thinking about somebody in particular who had a lot of anxiety around text.
Yeah.
And this person's anxiety was around not responding right away, because
Yeah.
there was a fear that if they didn't respond right away, that their friends would be very upset, or family members. So we explore that. Now, this is not in the coaching realm. This is in the therapy realm, which is very
Yep.
different. But in the therapy space, we explored that, and we talked behaviorally about some things that they could do.
Yep.
Like, for example, how about you set a timer for 5 minutes or 10
Yep.
minutes, and then give yourself some time to respond.
Yeah.
Why is that important? Because there's a part of our brain called the amygdala. There's a little alarm system. And the responsibility of the alarm system is to let us know that we're in danger or whatever. Well, it's not always accurate.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yep.
always assess things accurately. So
Right.
I explain this. I give this education around why they're doing what they're doing. And what we're trying to do is teach that part of your brain that, oh, there's no danger in this. There's no actual urgency. And
Yes.
so we want to teach you to sit with the discomfort and become comfortable with the distress tolerance. We want you to increase your distress tolerance by
Yeah.
allowing yourself to be uncomfortable for a little bit longer,
Yeah.
right? And while you're doing that, and we're teaching your brain, your alarm system to calm down, now we're going to integrate some, because that's the behavioral piece, right? Now we're going to integrate some thoughts, right?
Right.
Like, so what would really happen if you didn't respond? Is
Yeah.
this friend really going to be so upset? Has that happened before where you haven't been able to respond? Are they still here? Right.
Yeah.
And so helping people integrate both behavioral strategies and cognitive strategies that are going to help them change their stories. But it's a slow process. It's not a quick process because remember, we're working with various things. We're working with behavior that has served you in the past. We're working
Right.
with your brain. And then one of the other things that, if again, we were in the therapy space versus the coaching space, that I would have explored and have explored is, so tell me where you learned that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about where
Yeah.
you first learned that, right? Because it's not your friend. We've seen now that it's not your friend. It's not that your friend is, mean, or that your friend, is not tolerant of you, right? Not responding right away.
Yeah.
Tell me where you first experienced or witnessed that lack of intolerance or that need, that urgency to respond right away. Right. So
Yeah.
first we start with, or I start with, um, the skills, teaching them some skills to help them in the here and now. And once there's been a little bit of mastery with that and they can see that they do it, then we start going a little bit back to where it started so that we can see when these triggers come up in the present, they can recognize them.
Yes. Oh my gosh,
So
Karen, so many powerful things to unpack there, my friend. And the thing that I appreciate the most is kind of twofold. The first is when you talked about meeting people where they're at, right? Validating their experience, talking about, everything that they've managed to figure out up until this point and like encouraging them to know like you're doing the best you can.
yeah,
And that matters, right? We don't like, throw away or shame in any way, like anything that you've tried to build skill wise. And I think women need to hear that over and over and over because so often in the overall wellness conversation for
yeah,
women, there's all of this internalizing we do, right? About the habits that
100%.
we've picked up, about the routines that we've leaned on, about the people that we've listened to that maybe haven't led us well, or whatever it is, right? And we
Yes.
internalize. And when you have someone like you who's saying, you know what, there's so much to unpack inside of how the brain functions, behaviors we've learned along the way, the emotional wellness component, like we need to normalize, we need to validate, we need to encourage, we need to explain and give permission around this idea of like, you've done the best you can, and that is amazing, right?
Yeah.
And the second thing that I love that you shared is around this idea of how we struggle to sit in the uncomfortable. And I see this so much in my work. I've seen it a lot in my own personal wellness journey, especially the older I get, the more self awareness I build. The more I have really open, authentic conversations with women about what wellness really looks like, but also, most importantly, what it feels like. There is this huge component around we struggle with this idea of slowing down, this idea of sitting with ourselves,
Yeah.
this idea of being uncomfortable. And one of the things I'd love for you to share even a little bit more in the work you do and from what you see with the clients you talk to, et cetera, is why is that? Like, where does it really come from? Because I think women need to hear this out loud, right? We need to verbalize this experience because it's very real in our inside out health journey. And I want women to be, again, validated in their potential experience, but also to understand like, here's where it maybe came from. And here are the things that you can continue to do to kind of work through it, become more self-aware, and build into new skills, new behaviors. Because that's the stuff that makes a difference when we're working on our inside out wellness. So I'd love for you to share a little more, my friend.
Yeah. I think that again, with if you work with different therapists and different coaches, I think you will definitely get a different answer from different people because they're working from different lenses.
Yep.
For me and the lens that I work from an attachment lens
Yeah.
and from a self-awareness lens.
Yeah.
And so if you're working with me, what I would explore and kind of help to pinpoint and clarify is, when did you start receiving these messages? Because a lot of these messages they're not verbal. A lot of them are actually nonverbal. And that is why this is so hard oftentimes to pinpoint, because
Yeah.
it's not the it you know it's not often the verbal messages.
Yeah.
It is the attitudes and the values that you hear about and the things that we like and don't like, right? I mean, countless times what I hear from my clients are, well, I knew that I had to behave really well and be like great at school, whatever, because I saw what happened to my brother, or I saw what happened to my sister,
Yeah.
because they just did whatever they wanted. They were always rebelling, sneaking out. And
Yeah.
I saw how disappointed my parents were, or I saw how upset, or how I saw how many fights they caused.
Yeah.
And so they're learning that, oh, if I do that, right, this is going to cause all of this stuff. So they're taking from somebody else's experience. Now remember, you're young, right?
Yeah.
You're taking from somebody else's experience and saying, okay, well, if I do that, this is what's going to happen. Now, if you ask the brother or sister, there's probably a very different experience that they're having. And I say this, I've said this before, and I'll say it 1,000 times again. Parents, you're not raising the same kid. I
Yep.
don't care if you have the same rules for every kid that you have.
Yeah.
Every relationship that you have with every child is going to be very individual, because
Yeah.
they are individuals. They have different personalities. They have different personality traits. You may not even realize it, but even the way that your tone might be different with one versus the other, and you may
Yeah.
not realize it. A lot of times when we have children, they bring out our own stuff. Like if you had a difficult relationship with your mom or with your dad, and you have a little boy or a little girl, like that will trigger some things
Yeah.
without you realizing it, right? Some of that unresolved stuff.
We'll get back to our conversation shortly after this message. If you are an overwhelmed and completely confused mom who just wants a simplified, easy to follow, and understandable plan when it comes to their health and wellness journey, then you're in the right place. As a wellness coach, I focus most on empowering women to follow a highly personalized and bio-individual plan that actually gets you results and that feels sustainable for your longevity. I'd love to invite you to set up a free coaching call to talk about your health and wellness journey. Head to erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call today. Again, that URL is erinshreer.com/coaching to set up your call. And to make it even easier, head to the show notes of this podcast and click free coaching session to set up your call ASAP. Now let's dive back into the conversation.
Yes. So that's the lens that I work with, is helping people to understand where in their childhood patterns and the conditioning, maybe directly or indirectly, was it that they saw or learned that this behavior was okay or not okay. And when I say nonverbal, I always use this example of, for example, if you are at work and your manager or your boss responds to you in a certain way or with a certain look, and you start spiraling and you don't know why, but you just start spiraling, one of the things that we might explore is, well, what is it about that look? What does it remind you of? And, we might find that, mom or dad, when they were young, never yelled, but man, if they gave you that look or that quietness, or if they retreated, that meant you have deeply disappointed them or whatever it is. And so when we're not aware of these things, we take that into adulthood and we don't realize it. So that is why I like to help people understand what the childhood conditioning and patterns look like. They can't resolve that. Like, that's done. That's in the past. So we're not going into it trying to resolve anything. No, we're using that as part of the tool so that we can say, okay, now in present day, where has this been showing up? Are we choosing partners where we are reenacting certain dynamics of our family, certain unresolved things. Are we choosing partners
Yeah.
that are very familiar in some of the dysfunctional dynamics of
Yeah.
our, the relationships that we saw or experienced, and we're on some level trying to fix it?
Yeah.
Or we choose a partner that reminds us of that very uncomfortable but yet familiar dynamic. So
Yeah.
that's how I work, is coming from that lens and helping people understand where it came from so that they can recognize it in the here and now, and then have the tools and strategies so that in the future they can become an observer of it
Yeah.
and be able to make changes, if that makes sense.
It's so good, so good. And one of the things that I know you've shared with me that I kind of want to recall here in our conversation is just this idea of how we start to kind of adopt what other people need. How do we tune into what fills their cup? How do we make sure things stay like calm or
Yeah.
collected or whatever it is, right? And when we overly focus there, we under focus on, but what about me, right? And I
Yeah.
know you shared this a little bit in your story of this idea of like you got really in tune with what other people needed. You were a nurturer in a lot of different ways. And there were seasons where for you, you kind of started to get to this place of like, but I don't even really understand like what I need, why I need it, why I'm tired, why I'm exhausted, why I feel so unwell. And, I think that's a very common thing for women, especially, is whether it's a past of what we've been conditioned to do or our current season or a life transition. And we get so in tune with nurturing other people and pouring into others and understanding their needs that, again, we kind of miss what it is that we need. And I'd
Yeah.
kind of love to, I want to unpack that a little bit because with everything you just shared, I think it can be very hard for women to kind of get into that vulnerable place of saying, I've kind of neglected myself. I don't even know exactly why, and I don't really know where to go from here. Will you share a little bit about kind of your individual experience with that concept? Because I think, again, for women, we need to hear how we've all, in some capacity, been a little bit lost on taking care of others and neglecting ourselves,
Yeah, I think it's because it's normalized. I mean,
Yeah.
it was absolutely normalized for me from the time I was little.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I'll share this. It brings me to a story. It's not even a story. It's just a memory that I just had, actually. When you asked this question, when remember being little, I was very like, I like to dance a
Yeah.
lot, and
Love that.
had no qualms, as little children
Yeah.
often don't, right?
Yeah.
So uh, it was interesting when I think back. My role was very much about like, oh, look how cute and she dances, So I was the entertainer,
Yeah.
and for when we had guests over or whatever, right? Like that was fun, and da da da. My brothers, like that wasn't expected of them. Like if they were out there throwing rocks and getting in
Yeah.
trouble, like that was normal. So from a very
Right.
early age, like I didn't realize it, obviously, but that conditioning, that normalization of like, you are here to entertain and take care and make sure that we are all happy and having a lot of fun, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really innocent thing. Again, this is why I'm saying, like, this is nothing to do with like, oh, parents are bad or parents are good. No, this is not a judgment thing. This is something that happens so invisibly and so many times not even on purpose. But if you can just imagine right now that scenario of like, oh, this was my role. Listen, it became very clear to me very easily that my role is to make sure that people are happy and pleased, and oh, you're so funny, and like how cute, and look at the dancing, da da da.
Yeah.
And it was also very clear that my brothers didn't have to show up for a minute. They could be outside playing, like it was not, there was a very clear difference.
Yeah.
And so the expectations became very clear very early on,
Yeah.
and those were all non-verbal messages. So
Yeah.
that was my point in saying that before, is that you have all of these non-verbal messages. So
Yeah.
there's these gender roles, there's also societal roles. I think it's really important to mention culture, because
Yep.
culturally, uh, there are cultures where this is just the way it is,
Yeah.
And it's, in some cases it's considered offensive or inappropriate
Yeah.
to challenge that. So I do think it's really important for us to be mindful of that and to be respectful
Yeah.
of the fact that culturally, as a woman, you may be limited maybe in what you feel it can do without risking
Yeah.
rejection or abandonment, because that's a
Yeah.
real fear, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
That being said, what I would say is, um, are there other areas, where
Yeah.
are other areas that we can find that we can lean in more to being ourselves?
Yeah.
I just went to the most amazing little dinner this weekend with a few friends of mine.
Yeah.
A friend of mine hosted a girls' night out dinner at her house,
So
and
fun.
we had all of these different women. It was like 10 of us with like different backgrounds, cultural, religious backgrounds, all these, and I know, based on a lot of the questions and a lot of discussions that we had so much fun. But, I know for a fact that there were women there that what they talked about and the things that they laughed about and the things that we, just really normalized in that space, absolutely 100% would not be allowed
Yeah.
when they went back home or when they went back. Right. So
Yeah.
to me, that was gold. That was such gold, because we were able to be in this very safe space where we all were able to laugh about things that are quote unquote not allowed,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful, safe space. So things like that, are we able to find little pockets
Yes.
of moments, times, friendships where we can allow that part of ourselves to be? Because we're not in silos. We're not just
Yeah.
one person. We're deep and complex, and there are many parts of us. And
Yes.
so, and I'm not talking about compartmentalizing. I'm not saying, we only do this. We're saying, let's recognize that we are a blend of many things.
Yes.
And if we are in a space or in a situation, because of society, cultural, whatever it is, that we can't be our authentic selves all the time,
Yeah.
like, let's recognize that, right? And
Yeah.
then let's just find these pockets of places that will allow us to fulfill those parts of us that also need
Yeah.
to be out there.
Yes, 100%. The complexity of who we are. Like, I just appreciate that you're sharing that, because women need to hear this, right? One of the things that I know I experienced stepping into motherhood was this concept of like, now I'm a mom, right? And
Yeah.
I have to be in mom mode all the time and momming all over the place and taking care of only my kids. And, I lived in that headspace for a season, and I found myself in a very dark place as I
Yeah.
started to come out of it, realizing like I had not done anything to really nurture who I was as a woman, care for myself enough as a wife, like get deeper in my relationship with God, like all of these things for me personally. Like, I just started to let go because I felt like I had to be siloed into this one role.
Yeah.
And I just appreciate you sharing and reminding us we are complex people with a lot of different hats that we wear, with a lot of different things that we love.
Yeah.
And as we grow older, evolve, change, whatever, like, it's so incredibly imperative to make sure we're nurturing these pieces that make us feel alive, right? That really help us feel like we are who we are, and we should nurture that and pay attention to that and celebrate that in a lot of different ways. And I know when we first started our conversation today, that was one of the things I mentioned, was having this passion to empower people
Yeah.
to really like live their uniqueness and embrace who they are. And so one of the things I want to transition into sharing a little bit more, Karen, is this concept of, we've talked a lot about emotional well-being. We've talked a lot about behaviors and habits and things that come up from conditioning, society, etc. And I want to kind of bridge the gap here and talk a little bit about how that plays a massive role in overall health. And I know in your story, you talked about some of the things that you started to experience in your past job, and then as you became a mom and started to feel all of these different things beyond even the emotional realm, right? Like mentally, you were mentally, physically, you were experiencing changes. And again, this kind of goes back to this concept of living in your uniqueness and giving yourself that permission to really embrace what it is that you need and why. And so I'd love to kind of talk a little bit more about health overall and in your work, not only your own experience, but also in your own work. Like, how do you see this emotional component also play a larger role in the bigger picture of health? And how would you kind of share, more of the patterns that you've maybe uncovered, or kind of what you've personally learned along the way as far as why it all matters as far as nurturing our own, inside out health?
I think people tend to separate, and I use the word compartmentalize before.
Yeah.
I think people tend to compartmentalize themselves in the different realms that make up who we are. Um, you know, in our work in the psychotherapy world and the social work world,
Yep.
we fill out something called a biopsychosocial,
Yeah.
right? And
Yep.
a biopsychosocial is a form where we ask our patients about their biology in terms of like what's going on, illnesses, da-da-da.
Yep.
The psychology piece, right, which is like the mental health piece, and the
Yep.
social. We talk about social supports and family members and relationships. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
The biopsychosocial gives us a holistic view of all of the components, right,
Yes.
of the person and what's going on in their life and what are the things that might be affecting one with the other.
Yeah.
So when we just look at one piece and then look at the other and then look at the other and not look at things holistically,
Yeah.
we, in my opinion, tend to miss things. We tend to miss things where one thing could be helpful to the other.
Yes.
Um, I specifically am thinking about, for example, mind gut stuff, right?
Yep.
I worked with a lot of, in the beginning of my career, I worked with chronic illness, specifically with inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, and mind gut connection.
Yes.
And that is where I really learned to understand the connection between our emotions and how they impact our body.
Yeah.
So, even with, let's say, with someone who has inflammatory bowel disease, where you have actual structural, damage, right, to somewhere in your GI tract, right?
Yeah.
That's one thing. But what we're talking about is how are they looking at their illness? How are they looking at their illness? How are they seeing themselves as a result of this diagnosis?
Yeah.
What are the self limiting beliefs and
Yes.
thoughts that they might be having? What are they feeling about themselves? Are they feeling now that they're less than?
Yeah.
Are they feeling that, oh, my body betrays me, so I can't trust my body? So, right. So we're going to cut off whatever emotions you might be feeling, or maybe the only emotion that you feel is anger or irritation,
Yeah.
right, about your body. And so, um, when you are looking at your overall health, it is not important. It is critical
Yes.
that you employ and include the emotional and psychological piece, because the way that you talk to yourself, the narrative, the story you tell yourself is going to impact the way that you feel. And your body, your brain, and your organs are constantly sending signals to each other back and forth, right? We're not going to get into the science of that, but they're constantly in talks.
Yep. 100%.
And so, as a matter of fact, I said I wasn't going to answer, but as a matter of fact, we talk about different chemicals in our bodies, right? Serotonin, right? Quote unquote, the happy hormone. Well, serotonin, there's only, I think it's like maybe 20%. I think, don't quote me on that, but I think it's only 20% that, resides in our brain.
Yeah.
The other 80%
You're
is in
right.
our gut,
You're right. Yep.
right? So if we don't have good gut health and that microbiome is, off, well, we're not going to feel great and we're going to feel irritable. We might get depressed, right?
Yeah.
So there are connections that are undeniable. We might refuse or not want to acknowledge them,
Right.
but that's not going to make that go away,
Right.
because that is what it is. And so being able to look at the whole thing and look at the whole person with all of these areas in mind, I think is the key to overall well-being.
Yeah.
Because if I am feeling, and I've had this, what I'm about to talk about, like myself, when I am
Yeah.
feeling incredibly fatigued because I'm having a horrible, inflammatory day,
Yeah.
and all I could say to myself is, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
You can't, you should know better. You should be doing better.
Yep.
And that is all I'm saying to myself. And yet my body is like, girl, get
Yeah.
over yourself.
Right.
It's not
Yeah.
happening today.
Yeah.
Well, you can't force your body to do more than it can. And
Yeah.
so what we want to learn to say is, okay, so today 60% is my 100%.
Yep.
This is
100%.
it, right?
Yeah.
And learn to acknowledge that, and also learn to, I'd say, acknowledge the feelings, like,
Yep.
okay, I'm really upset about this. Say that.
Yeah.
I'm pissed about this.
Yeah.
Go ahead, say that.
Yeah.
You will actually feel much better if you allow yourself to just name it,
Yeah.
because it's also one day, it's tomorrow. And
Yep.
even if you are incredibly ill and you are in a situation where this is kind of your everyday, this is where practicing gratitude comes
Yep.
in. Because
Yep.
if the next day you are feeling kind of the same way, but oh, maybe you were able to get up with a little bit less pain, okay, then we can acknowledge that. And
Yes.
that's a little better than yesterday.
Yeah, I love that you shared that, because I think, again, it goes back to that
Yeah.
internalizing that we do, that we don't recognize, plays a huge role in how we feel from the inside out. And this is one of the things I talk to many women about in the work I do as a functional health coach, is if we're not paying attention to how we speak to ourselves, how we may or may not be beating ourselves up, what old
Yeah.
narratives we're carrying into our current lifestyle, our body, our brain, health goals, progress, whatever it is you want to transform or change or work towards, it's never going to add up the way you want because of that internal soundtrack. And so
Yeah.
the thing that I love most in our conversation today, Karen, is how much you are talking about the emotional side of our wellness. It is a
Yeah.
huge driver to how we feel and what we can actually accomplish in every area of our life. And so I just can't thank you enough for your incredible perspective and just everything that you shared today about how we have to be looking holistically, how we have to be giving ourselves permission to understand what it is that we've maybe gone through, but also be gentle and give ourselves grace as we're stepping into the next version of where we're going. It's such a journey. And I want women to
Yeah.
feel empowered along that journey. So I can't thank you enough. One last question I want to ask you before we start to kind of wrap up is kind of around this idea of women that are in the 30, 40, 50, 60 range, right? We're in this midlife season. And, at this point in our life, there's a lot of life that we've lived, right? There's a lot that we've likely gone through, likely have managed in some capacity. We've had different life transitions, all kinds of stuff crop up. And one of the things that you just said as we were talking about holistic health was this idea of, my body doesn't work with me anymore. It doesn't work for me anymore. Or
Hmm.
I feel broken in some way. And I think, in midlife specifically, with a lot that happens and changes physiologically for us as women, we get into that headspace a little bit more, right? We emotionally beat ourselves up a little bit more, maybe than we have had done already in a little bit time, right? I know for me, like, I got to a place where I felt pretty mentally and emotionally strong. And then I kind of got into another season of midlife where I felt unearthed again, right?
Yeah.
Like my body, my brain, everything kind of changed and adjusted again, like a whole nother transition, a whole nother thing came up in my life. And I know this is very real for women. And I know you've talked a little bit about it on your journey too with me. And so I want to kind of talk a little bit about this in your mind, right? For women who are experiencing kind of this new life transition, emotionally and mentally, like, what are the things that we need to make sure we're really doing to ensure that we're taking care of ourselves?
Well, we go through these different life stages, 30s, 40s, 50s, pre-menopause, pre-menopause, menopause, maybe little pre-menopause into menopause. We're not sure. We have to wait.
Right.
And But while we're waiting for a dog to maybe give us the stamp of, yeah, this is a diagnosis, we're feeling it
Yeah.
all.
Yep.
And yes, it makes sense where you might say to yourself, my body is just like not working with me. My body's betraying me. I can't trust my body.
Yep.
So, to all the women listening out there who might be going through that, what I would say to you is, what if you were to take that perspective and put it aside for a second, right? And just, I'm not saying get rid of it. You can take it back, right? But just for a second, just put it aside and hit the reset button and say, okay, so what if I were to look at this another way and my body's trying to tell me something?
Yeah.
If my body, instead of me feeling like it's betraying me, what if I were to lean in and ask it, what are you trying to tell me right now?
Yeah.
What's going on? Right? What would it say?
Yeah.
See if you could see what it would say to you.
Yeah.
Right? So, for example, if it starts to say to you, well, I really start to struggle with my energy levels at around 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
And that sucks because I got to pick up the kids.
Yeah.
That's the time when I got to pick up the kids and, have the snacks and this and that. Right. Now, I could see why you might say, seriously, this is like not the right time for you
Yeah.
to start breaking down on me.
Right. Right.
Because you've got stuff to do.
Yeah.
So what I would say is put that aside for a second and say, you're totally right. You have things to do. But what if your body was your ally? What if instead of your enemy, your body was actually your ally and it's kind of knocking at you and saying, hey, I crash around this time. I'm really feeling the effects of not sleeping well last night.
Yeah.
Or, my estrogen is low.
Yeah.
Or progesterone. You may not know that.
Yeah.
But something's off, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's what I would say is to lean into that and look at the other side, because you've spent a lot of energy and a lot of time already invested in thinking that it's not working for you. So
Right.
I want to challenge you to do the opposite. I want to challenge you to invest a little time and energy into maybe putting it on the other side and saying, okay, well, what if you were my ally? Well, what would you be trying to tell me?
Yeah. So good.
And just kind of take it from there.
The reframe is so important. So important. And I know for me, that was one of the things that I really had to start to embrace. And I've learned along the way, like the reframe of what you tell yourself mentally and emotionally as you grow older, right? It just becomes more and more important when we think about our longevity, when we think about being able to show up, when we think about whole health and wellness. The internal soundtrack is massive. And so I just appreciate you sharing that, because I think, again, women need to hear it.
Yeah. And I also want to say something about permission too, because that's another big one. I think that we have a lot of struggles giving ourselves permission to do anything that feels even a little selfish.
Yeah.
Right? Even if it's not selfish, right? So we really struggle. Look, therapy is not accessible for everyone, right? You can't always find, and your insurance doesn't always cover it. And if it does, maybe you can't find a therapist that'll take it.
Yep.
It's getting more and more expensive, or if not, you're overwhelmed. That's the other piece, right? With a lot of these companies that are, kind of making it more commercial space, there's this overwhelm of all of these, availabilities, and you don't know where to go. So sometimes, sometimes we need to seek out that quote unquote permission. Yeah. And by permission, I also want to clarify, it's not anybody saying, yeah, you can do this. It's literally just hearing somebody say, it is okay to feel like that. It is okay to not like your kids today.
Yep.
You still you still love them, but it's okay that they're being little jerks and you don't like them today. That's okay. That does not make you a bad person. It doesn't make you a bad mom. It makes you superhuman.
Yes.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. Yes. Oh
right?
my gosh, 100%. Yes.
So things like, your podcast, hopefully my podcast and other podcasts, books, articles. There is such a wealth of information that people can seek out
Yeah.
to find their permissions. So
Yes.
you don't have to be necessarily working with a therapist or with a coach if you can't afford it, or if life just doesn't allow you the time. There are other ways. Allow
Yeah.
yourself to be a little bit more flexible so that you can find that permission
Yeah.
in other platforms and in other ways.
Yes. Because like you said, it's critical. Like it's
It is
not,
critical. I don't see this. This is a non-negotiable for
yeah,
me.
not negotiable. 100.
And I've seen it time and time again when there's this compartmentalization of these two things,
Yeah.
and the resistance most of the time is not because I don't want to feel, or it's because, well, I don't know what to do with this when I do.
Yep. Yep. And I just wanted to call that attention because you said this is critical, and I wholeheartedly agree. When we aren't doing something in this realm of our inside out health,
Yeah.
it's just not, we're not going to really truly be able to feel the way, honestly, that we deserve to feel in our
Yeah.
day-to-day life. And, that's what I want to empower women to understand. Like, you are not meant or called to just survive through life, to feel exhausted, to feel depleted, to not feel like grounded and fulfilled in your body. Like, that is not the way. And, really nurturing everything that Karen said today is a massive component to how you feel day in and day out. And so, Karen, I can't thank you enough. You are incredible, my friend.
You're
I
so
feel
welcome.
so blessed to be able to have this conversation, to normalize all of these facets to our health, to talk more about the mental and emotional side, because it is a critical piece to how we feel. And, I want that to be something that women embrace and really understand. And so
Yeah.
before we officially sign off, will you quickly share how people can find you online, connect with you, learn about your work, and just kind of, to talk more if they have questions, et cetera?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you again. I think you're such a powerful speaker and communicator of all this just incredible information. So I feel blessed and so grateful to, have met you and to be in your presence and to learn, to listen to your podcast, and learn even more about myself and my own journey.
Yeah,
So that's been a wonderful blessing for me too. And
appreciate it.
for anybody who wants to learn more, they can go to my website, which is KarenConlon.com, my Instagram. And of course, there's also my Emotionally Wealthy podcast, which is, on all the platforms. So those are the best ways to reach me. And I again, and so glad that you're doing what you're doing. It is so important. And I have learned so much from, your episode. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Karen. And we will make sure everything is linked in the show notes of this podcast. So if you have questions for Karen, you want to learn more from her, head over to Emotionally Wealthy, listen to her podcast. Lots of great ways to continue the education and conversation. And Karen, I can't thank you enough for an amazing chat today, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Erin. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Talk to you soon. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. I know balancing time and energy can be a challenge, and I'm so proud of you for listening in and investing in your wellness journey. I feel incredibly grateful to connect with you and for the opportunity to share more knowledge, stories, and encouragement related to all things wellness. I would love to hear how this podcast has served you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on either iTunes or Spotify. Your support truly means the world to me and helps me reach more women just like you and me who are looking to transform their health from the inside out. Plus, when you share this episode with a friend, we invite more women in to learn alongside us. What a gift. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we know, the better we can do. For ourselves, for our families, and our future. Well done on taking the step towards a healthier, happier you. Until next week, stay empowered and stay well.